So today I'm going to talk about how researchers can share their insights with people outside of their project teams. I'll take a case study approach, so I'll talk about this one particular research project. It's about a project that ended but had research findings that are still relevant that needed to be accessible for future use. So you may be wondering, what kind of team does a researcher work with? At Shopify, a UX researcher is embedded in product teams. It's an interdisciplinary nature to these teams with a front-end developer, content strategist, product designer, back-end developer. It's not comprehensive. We have a product manager missing. Sometimes you have a data analyst. So these are some renditions of teams that we have. The particular team that I'm on is the online store team. So at Shopify, the online store team refers to the part of the look and feel of your store. So things such as templates, what we call themes, layout of your page, fonts, typography, colors, the drop-down menus, all this refers to what we call the online store. There are other parts of Shopify that happen online, such as shipping, marketing, inventory, products, but those are separate categories. So that's a brief introduction to let you know where we're coming from. So, as I said, our project had concluded. We had a research deliverable that we needed to disseminate to the rest of Shopify. We really wanted it to be based on principles of interaction, empathy, and discoverability. These terms you may have heard used in a lot of different contexts. So in this scenario, interaction refers to showing your research to people that are not too familiar with the context, people who are not involved in your team. So we had to think about how do we help them engage with it? How do we make the research compelling to them? With empathy, as you do research, obviously when you share it, you want to communicate and have people empathize with the experience of those who use your product. For Shopify, we refer to them as entrepreneurs. Discoverability, basically surfacing related research at the right time without overwhelming the reader too much. So first, I was wondering, has anyone here ever started a business? Freelancing, consulting? Yeah. So for those who started a business, how many knew how to run a business before starting it? How many didn't? How many had to learn on the fly? And how many wish they could go back and redo some things, remake some decisions? Because there's a big learning curve. Because starting a business can be very overwhelming. It can be overwhelming as you start. It can be overwhelming as things go well. When we were speaking with new entrepreneurs, we learned that they had done a lot of legwork even before they signed up for Shopify. Signing up for Shopify was not the beginning of starting their online business. It happened after they had thought about their finances, sorted out their work schedules, figured out how to balance care of the family with this new business idea they had. And as they started, they continually had to learn a lot of things on the fly, including how to use Shopify, but a bunch of things outside of it. So we had these findings that are relevant to a lot of teams, not just online store, marketing, shipping, product sourcing. And what struck us was, as we spoke with these new entrepreneurs, is that they didn't always know what to expect after they made a decision, and they're sort of making decisions as in like what's in front of them at that time. This sort of medium-term or long-term strategy was not there because they didn't know the implications of their actions. But we felt like we really had to communicate this experience to other people at Shopify. So we wanted to build awareness. We didn't want to, be prescriptive and push information down people's throats. We wanted to let other teams know of what was going on, and everyone at Shopify, the stuff they work on touches entrepreneurs' lives in some way. So everyone has this tacit knowledge of different parts of what it means to be an entrepreneur. How to share amounts of research. Familiar ways in which I was accustomed to doing it wouldn't work. I spent a lot of my life in grad school studying anthropology, so I'm used to people sharing their research through text, through pages, through words. And now I'm in the tech sector where research happens and insights need to be shared, but reading and writing is not the main part of someone's workflow in the same way that it is when you're a grad student or you're a professor or a researcher at a university. Our team is not the first to experiment with different ways of sharing research. Go to Medium, take a look at how UX research can be communicated, and you can come upon these approaches, such as Facebook's Mini Museum, where this researcher has printed out her research, put findings and visuals down the hallway so people can pass by, immerse themselves, see what's going on, even if they're not working on that particular project. There's also something called Bathroom UX by Leah Bulley, insights written on the bathroom stalls, or tips just to take advantage of that empty time that you may have. So what both of these do is that it takes research out of the realm of the digital presentation, and colleagues can physically engage with it as they walk down the hallways, use the bathroom. And the idea is it can build understanding, form connections between different projects, and spark fresh ideas. So we wanted to immerse people too in our research, but we knew that we couldn't count on doing in-person workshops or meetings. That could work in Montreal. We're a team in Montreal, so we could do something here. But we have offices elsewhere, not just Ottawa and Toronto, Waterloo, San Francisco. So then we're thinking we also have this remote audience to work with, an audience that is not physically here. So then we're thinking, well, what do we do? Do we send an email? Are people going to read an email? That doesn't seem very engaging. So then we're thinking maybe we can have some kind of communication in which there's an interaction that's expected. Maybe we can include some parts of our findings and then ask the readers questions. What do you think? How do you think this scenario should go? What should happen here? So as we were brainstorming all this as a team, we came up with this idea of the choose your own adventure story. Maybe you've seen this as you were growing up in some libraries, or maybe you've read them. I know I have. So if you just take a look over here, it says that there's 40 possible endings to this story. So you have this mission or quest, the Cave of Time, that's where you are. And when you read the book, you don't start at page 1 and end at page 100. You jump around the whole book and you explore all these different possibilities. So we created our own version, a digital one. We thought of our audience with this format, and we thought that it served them well because it wouldn't be as if people in Montreal are at an advantage versus people in Ottawa or Toronto. So we're excited about this idea of creating the Choose Your Own Adventure story because people could just look through it as they had free time, on their desktop, on their mobile. And in terms of being immersive, well, we're thinking stories are immersive if you can use your imagination. So that's already more further along than writing a research report of what happened. So for the interaction, we invited the readers to make decisions for the character. They can choose yes or no over here. Making one decision leads you down a particular pathway, which in turn allows you to make a whole set of other decisions. So the backstage view, this is just part of it, of the Choose Your Adventure story looks like this. So you had seen 3 pages, and each of those white squares represents one of those pages. So depending on the choices you make, you can go down particular kinds of pathways. So it was kind of crazy to look at, but we really liked that nonlinear format because we felt like it did justice to the reality of new entrepreneurs. As you go through the adventure, sometimes there can be moments like this, and sometimes there can be moments like that. So we had to empathize with our audience, who are our colleagues at Shopify, so that they could empathize with our entrepreneurs. And speaking of our entrepreneurs, as we wrote the story, we're thinking of how do we represent them? Shopify has more than 500,000 people on its platform. What kind of character could we create that does justice or represents all of our users? Maybe you can just take a moment to think for yourselves if you had this task. You had to write a story describing a character. Who would you create that can encompass all these diverse entrepreneurs? So some of my thinking was to think about the name and to think about the gender. So with the name, I wanted something that was not, typical English or Anglophone name in case it left other people out. And then for gender, I didn't want it to be very obvious when looking at the character, is this male or is this female? Like I just wanted someone read it to think of anyone they thought of that could be part of this story. So the name for the character was Zell. It doesn't sound like a universal name. It may not be in other parts of the world, but it didn't sound like a typical name. So that was a point for us. And then for the illustrations, we worked with an illustrator to draw out some formations of the character, take a look at it, ask other people around me in this lounge, like, what do you think? Does this person look male or female? Okay, take it back and just tweak on it. And for the story, we also use the pronoun they rather than he or she. So that leads to some awkward sentences sometimes, such as they wanted their friends to help them. It's like, help who wanted what over there? So it can be awkward. And that was the first bit of feedback I got from the story, in which someone was bothered by the word they and they felt like they couldn't read it. But I thought it was a worthwhile kind of awkwardness, as you know, we're in this process of trying to make characters that are inclusive of many different realities. So for discoverability, as I mentioned, we had done a bunch of research and gotten a bunch of data that was not only relevant to the project they were working on, but other projects. So the story, the way in which it was created, it was based on that qualitative data that we had. Like that's how we created the scenarios for the characters. It was very data informed. And I work in an online store, and I was focusing on new entrepreneurs. But there are other UX researchers who work at other parts of Shopify and other offices who've also done research that touches upon the reality of new entrepreneurs. So I wanted to insert their research as well, just to be this research powerhouse of a deliverable. So the way in which I did that was, as you're reading it, there's an option to click on a link, and that link leads to related research, which may be stuff that like I did or stuff that other researchers do. But if you don't want to read it, you don't have to. You can just click on next and then just keep proceeding. So I'm the researcher talking about a research deliverable. I've also mentioned teamwork a lot, and the way in which this is created, it couldn't have happened without a team. Even people that were not involved in the project, just taking it upon themselves to give us some of their time and some of their talent. So basically, yeah, it's a research deliverable, but I was not alone in this, and at some point, it just felt like it was a long, winding path to our research results. Like describing it now, these principles of interaction and empathy and so on, we didn't know about that when we were at the beginning creating it. We just knew we had some goals we wanted to reach, but we weren't sure what it would look like. So then in terms of the impact, the general goal was like shared understanding of the experience of new entrepreneurs. It's an onboarding resource for new employees that can take a look at it when they join. And I'm still in the online store team. There's multiple projects going on there. So then I can just contribute to the creation of other things that we work on, knowing all the stuff that I know from doing the research and reading other people's work on new entrepreneurs. So we started by thinking of principles of interaction, empathy, and discoverability. Thinking about that and holding that front of mind, we ended up with this story, this Choose Your Adventure story. So as I said, it required some creativity, there was ambiguity, unknown, but it was worthwhile to do because sharing research widely, that's how silos are broken down so that everyone can continue to work on user-centered products. So to end this talk, I'd ask, how would you change the way that you communicate with others next time you have information to share? When there's an email update created, a slideshow, article, blog post, what are the goals that you have when you deliver a message, and what is the best way to attain those goals? Because humans like to learn in all kinds of different ways, text and images and numbers. So how is it possible to leverage that to make your message most effective? And one thank you I'd like to say to end this talk is all the illustrations here were done by Ariel Lee. Can you raise your hand? She's right over there. So if you want to talk about illustrations or find out where you can look at more of her work, you're welcome to speak with her over there. And thank you very much.